You're floating along over the ground, wind flying by, sunset in the distance. You're heading for the rendezvous point where your friend is going to pick you up to fly to another planet. And then that happens. Ground vehicles right now are not a great experience in Star Citizen, particularly hovercraft. Today we'll look at how that is going to change, particularly with wheeled vehicles though, and get some updates on new development this week as well. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. And thanks to my newest patrons, Samuel Banga and Old Man Zim. It's weird having such a focus on ground vehicles in a space sim. You normally would think it'd be some super easy, simple solution for the subpar vehicle experience to complement spaceships, but no. Not only are there several different types of ground vehicles using different forms of movement, but the system going into determining these movements is meant to be physics-based and rely on the status of your parts and components, as well as the gravity on the planetary body you find yourself on. This, once again, is due to add an impressive amount of variety to how the game plays out in this new medium of travel. And with a game so detailed, it's best to get as close as you can to the things you're exploring. But while those vehicles are in-game and the system has been tweaked in the past, how are things going to improve so that I don't get stuck on a rock all the time? Or actually just enjoy the act of driving to a new location and racing in one of the many events that take part around the verse? Well, surprisingly enough, this episode wasn't incredibly full of information that actually answered that question, but it does seem there are two major changes to be made. The system is going to be more accurately physically based, taking into account the actual rotation speed and slippage of the wheel being used, or, in the tank's case, whichever tread is moving faster. This stimulation is handled via a curve in the editor that can provide distinct information on what's happening with the wheel during any given frame. This information can be affected by many variables. And two, there's a new HUD interface being worked on. Now, these two things are going to do a lot to change the driving experience in the game, but I wish there was a bit more quantitative information for us, maybe a before and after of the clips that we're seeing to show the difference in the driving mechanics. Regardless, improvements to the experience are always welcome, especially the new driving HUD. There really is no standardized UI experience for ground situations yet, due to the new nature of building blocks. A real HUD would be a phenomenal addition. And as they acknowledged during this episode, the Rock does indeed drive a bit better than other vehicles, so I'm interested in seeing how an updated model based around those improvements might translate to the whole lineup. They also of course slipped in an announcement of a new ground vehicle here, which seems to have a player control size 1 gun as well as 2 missile pods. This one should be good fun to make some org events out of for the Garden Interstellar Initiative, which you can join in the video description below if you'd like. Next, we've got a slightly rapid-fire segment of new updates coming later this year. We start off this section with many old friends, some of which were in the roadmap in the monthly report but we are only just now seeing, and some of which have become regular updates every sprint report. The refinery deck improvements are touching the UI side with a few small improvements such as the new splash screen and auto logout features. Yay 2951. There's also a nice showcase of some of the new changes to the refinery decks coming in the next update, which will provide some variety to the environment and denote the more industrial nation of these space stations, which are more dedicated to the act of refining ore. Mining components, the topic of last week, saw a quick update with more detail being put into the UI supporting the feature. As the building block system continues to be built out, more and more teams will be able to easily adopt it to their needs, such as in this case. And the 3D rendition of this technology isn't far off, which I think will be used for the new star map and radar functionalities. Building on the circuit system we saw last year, which allows electronics and powered objects to rely on specific power sources, it appears custom lighting options in player apartments is quite far along, despite only being first mentioned last week. This shows that the power system seems to be progressing quite well, up to a point at which player-facing additions are just around the corner. Individual lighting options around the room are going to be a pretty cool detail, and even being able to custom pick a lamp, place it in your room, and always have it there to cast that perfect light for you adds quite a endearing touch. Next up was another update on hospitals, which at this point seem like they're going to be a regular updates of these sprint reports, much like the next feature we'll talk about. These hospitals are still in the whiteboxing phase, made apparent by the architecture, but the more interesting thing is noticing how it has changed from the last time we saw it just weeks ago. There's a lot of detail going into these installments, absolutely more than I thought they would need. Surgical rooms, waiting rooms, blood labs, and other rooms you might expect at a normal hospital. It leaves me wondering, is it really intricate site dressing, or is the medical segment of gameplay going to be much, much larger than I think most of us assumed? And of course, more NPC villages. As usual, the colonialism-styled outposts are making an appearance on our sprint report, and they're once again looking further along in their development process. The actual updates that these modular environments had seen were actually already talked about, though we get a quick refresher on the bits. Making sure each modular piece fits together well, making sure the seams aren't visible to players, determining the runtime probes for lighting, and making sure everything is finalized before artists come in and really put the work on these locations. Once all of these things have been figured out, with the capabilities of iCache, server meshing, and other back-end tech improvements, these locations should be able to be placed anywhere they are needed to populate the more remote locations in Pyro and Stanton, the first two star systems. And while they're made solely for NPCs in this first iteration, eventually we will be able to take, claim, and maybe even build something similar for ourselves. Last but certainly not least, another little R&D sneak peek. We have seen various iterations of the lightning VFX in Star Citizen. This new example is a reimagining of an old system that acts as a proof of concept for new lighting effects. While not meant for the game exactly, this is something that can be taken and applied to various other areas, such as the recently added stellar gas clouds. That's another week of updates for your pleasure. Not the most exciting week, but most effort is going towards polishing up features due to be added in the game next month. If you'd like to see what is coming out further on, subscribe to the channel and we'll start looking at long-term development in the coming months. And if you'd like to support my work and family, consider checking out the page over on Patreon, where you can get these videos early, printed out monthly reports, and other little perks here and there. As always, don't forget to look for that hidden code in the video that will get you more chances at winning this month's ship giveaway, down in the video description. And keep an eye out for some new forms of content I'm looking to deliver to you guys very soon. Thanks once again for checking out this talk. I'll see you guys next week. And thanks to my top supporters TK the Alpaca, the Huntress, Ben N, Dasek, Holston Coop, Guilty Conscious, Falcus Vipus, and Extreme Tuber.